Good evening, Admiral Rogers. How are you doing, sir?
Very good. Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
It's always great to see
This is
ROTC people. I've been a Navy ROTC individual myself a long time ago.
Yes, sir. That's the way to do it. We love ROTC.
There you go.
The flexibility, and I'm loving every minute.
There's more than one way to achieve that desired commission.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, speaking of ROTC, I kind of just want to bring it back to where you started and what got you interested in the military and kind of got you on that path towards getting that commission.
So I grew up in Chicago, a long way from the ocean, but I always wanted to be a naval officer. I read stories of the sea when I was a kid growing up, and I literally told my parents, I was 11 years old, I was in 6th grade, I went and told my parents, I'm going to be a naval officer, I'm going to drive ships for a living. I thought that would largely be through Annapolis. Unfortunately, my grades were good. I tried to get in, failed miserably. I then tried to get an ROTC scholarship. The grades weren't good enough, so I did what we called the college program then. You could participate if you gained entrance to the school, in my case, Harvard University. You could participate in the units, but you didn't get a monthly stipend, you didn't get a scholarship, so your tuition wasn't paid for, and there was no guarantee that you would get a regular commission. In fact, they would say only if we need you at the time and date of your graduation, we'll look at commissioning you, but we make no guarantee. But after doing that for about a year, I was very lucky. The professor of naval science, the commander of the unit, thought I had some kind of potential and offered me a scholarship, and I became a scholarship holder in my sophomore year, and then ultimately was commissioned and became a surface warfare officer. Drove ships in the Navy for my first 6 years or so.
Wow, that's incredible. It's definitely right here in the moment here in ROTC. It's definitely those little wins that get you to that bigger picture, and you've had quite the career.
Well, I tell you, if I could, one of the greatest lessons I ever experienced in life. I remember I got the letter from Annapolis telling me I had not been admitted to the Naval Academy. And my father comes home from work, and I'm very depressed, I'm very down. He says, "What's the matter?" And I said, my dream to be a naval officer is over. I was rejected by the Naval Academy. I'm not going to go to Annapolis. And he said, "What do you mean your dream is over?" So I'm not going to the Naval Academy. He said, "What was your dream?" "I want to go to the Naval Academy." He said, "What was your dream?" "I want to go to the Naval Academy." "No, I thought your dream was to be a naval officer." Yeah, that's my dream. Is this the only way? And he literally says to me, "Is this the only way to do it?" I said, "Well, I don't think so." And so he said, What are you sniveling about? Let's go. Let's figure out. Look at another way to do it." One of the best lessons I ever learned in life. Very fortunate.
Yep. I always think of it as kind of that revectoring, right?
Yeah.
So get you right back on
always
track.
more than one way to achieve the goal.
Yes, sir.
Focus on the goals and always think about possible.
Put your head down and get after it. So, and I know you mentioned surface warfare. So, what kind of ship did you drive, and what was kind of your mission while you're doing surface?
So I started as what we call a surface warfare officer. That means the specialty is designed to employ naval ships at sea. I was commissioned in 1981, August of 1981, and I joined my first ship at a relatively new destroyer in September of 1981 in Norfolk, Virginia. I'd just come back from a Mediterranean deployment, the Gulf Seeker shoot down off Libya. And I started as what we call a division officer. First tour for an officer at sea as a surface warfare officer. I was what we call the Combat Information Center officer and the anti-submarine warfare officer. So I ran as the CIC officer. I ran the kind of warfighting space of the dark room in the middle of the ship, all the weapon systems, all the computers. We fought the ship from there. I was responsible for running that when I was an ensign, and then when I was a lieutenant, they made me the anti-submarine warfare officer, which is the primary mission of this type of destroyer I was on. So you had all the weapons, the sonar system was the largest division on the ship, designed to detect and destroy submarines.
Wow, that's incredible. Definitely sounds like a pretty high speed.
It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So, definitely being that early young officer, what was your leadership perspective in that moment? And,
well, look, I was commissioned I showed up on my first ship. I was a 21-year-old brand new naval officer trying to figure out learn my trade as a maritime professional, but also learn, hey, how do you become a leader? So I'm trying to figure out, how do I fight this ship, learn its weapon systems, learn its capabilities and its vulnerabilities, learning how you do damage control at sea, because one of the interesting things about life at sea is you're in the middle of an ocean and you got this steel thing you're on, and that's it. If it sinks, you got nowhere to go but in the water. So you spend a lot of time figuring out how to make sure it doesn't sink. So damage control is very big. So you learn that skill. But most importantly, how do you lead? How do you motivate? How do you bring a team together to achieve a goal? That was the best lessons I ever learned was how do you lead and how can you be led by others? What's it like to be a good teammate? What's it like? What does it mean to be not just a leader, but to be a good follower?
Yes, sir. And what does that mean to you being a good leader and follower? How
So what I always thought was, hey, look, how can I work with this team of men and women at the time men, because when I first joined, only males could do combat at sea. That has changed now, which is great to see.
sir?
But I remember thinking to myself, I always believe that if a person gives of themselves to support the team, then the team or the unit or the organization needs to give of itself to support this individual. So I'm trying to figure out how can I get these individuals to work hard, to take advantage of their knowledge, to grow that knowledge, but at the same time, what can I do to try to help them achieve their goals? Do they want to become an officer? Do they want to become a chief petty officer? Do they view the Navy as something I'm going to do for a few years and then I'm going to go do something else? Whatever the goal is, how can I help you achieve?
That's incredible. That's awesome advice. I think anybody should take with them going forward in their career, not only as a military officer, but definitely in other fields as well.
Well, one of my lessons, and I always tell people this, remember, priority number one is the mission. But every good leader knows you can't achieve the mission without motivated men and women.
Absolutely.
So most of my peers would often say, hey, priority number one is my people. And I would always say, I don't agree with that. Priority number one is the mission. That's the only reason we're here. If we didn't have the mission, none of us would be here. But in achieving the mission, every good leader knows you can't do it without these great men and women. So make sure that as you're executing this mission, you're optimizing that team for success, both the success of the team and the mission of the unit, but also their individual, their personal success.
Absolutely, absolutely. And later on in your career, you started starting to work on cryptology, right? Is that what it's
Right. At
called?
about the 6 year mark, 5 year mark, I transitioned from surface warfare officer to what we call becoming a cryptologic officer. And that, think of cryptology as signals intelligence. It's the penetration of adversary phones, telecommunications, their digital data systems and computer networks, as well as telemetry and radar penetration and knowledge of radar systems.
Okay, and then and then after that 6 year mark, how did that work into your career as it progressed?
So one of the reasons why I went into cryptology was I wanted to do things that kept me going to sea. I loved being at sea. And in part because of the Navy's history, signals intelligence or cryptology played a huge role in the victory in Midway. It was the breaking of the Japanese code that told Admiral Nimitz, the commander of the Pacific, that, hey, the Japanese were going to conduct an operation against Midway, that they would be at this location at this time with this force. And that gave the U.S. Navy a great strategic advantage. Even though we were outnumbered, we had the advantage of knowledge and insight. And so we have a history as a service of doing that kind of activity at sea. Everything we build has this kind of activity built into it. I wanted to keep going to sea. So then when I transitioned, I promptly went back to sea on ships, but I did submarines. I flew airborne reconnaissance for a little while. I was really lucky. In my 37 years in uniform in the Navy, I literally have been at sea on almost every platform, submarine, ship, aircraft, squadron. I got to see a huge swath of the Navy and the Marine Corps as well as the SEALs. So I love the fact I got to do a lot of different stuff.
Oh, that's incredible. Yeah,
It's a lot of
definitely a
fun.
broad
It was a
spectrum
lot of
there
fun.
in your career. Do you have any great stories? Maybe some funny ones from your time at sea.
I tell you, I won't say the funniest. I will say the one that had the greatest impact. It happened in my second year. It was my greatest failure ever as a naval officer, and it shaped everything I did for the next 35 years. My ship is getting ready to make a traditional peacetime deployment to the Mediterranean. We're leaving in October of 1983. And like any deployment, you train for months, you certify, you prepare. Part of that training and certification was one of my collateral duty jobs was to run the naval gunfire teams on this destroyer. So I was responsible if we were tasked to lead the firing of those weapons to support troops ashore to shoot at other targets. So you go through the qualification process, you go on the range, you exercise the guns at sea. It never occurred to me that I'd ever actually do it in combat. And yet, when we leave in October of '83, we're at sea for 2 days, and suddenly we're told we're going to go to this location. I remember the message said, proceed at best possible speed to the following location. It was a latitude and longitude. I can remember being on the bridge with the captain as we're plotting this position. And the only thing we can see is that it seems to be a small island called Grenada. I had no clue what this thing is. Next thing I know, we go to the island and we're invading the island to free American students, medical students, and to restore the government of Grenada. We put the Marines ashore, the Marine Expeditionary Unit, and we actually jump part of the 82nd Airborne onto the island on the Point Salinas airfield. And so suddenly my unit is being called on to do naval gunfire support for these SEALs and for the United States Army. I've never trained with them, never practiced with them. We're getting ready to do our first fire mission. It's the SEALs have taken a radio station north of St. George's, the capital. Cuban security forces respond. The SEALs call us on the radio to say, look, we're trying to break contact because we have some wounded. We're trying to break contact so we can get our wounded to the beach. We just need some naval gunfire so these Cubans will put their head down so we can break contact. So, okay, get a fire mission, get a target. We run through the whole process. And the way this works on a ship, the computer gives you a solution, but you also do a visual solution, and you compare the two to make sure that they're aligned. I'm in that deep warfighting room, that combat information center where all the computers and the weapons are. You do the computer solution, I'm ready to go. I'm waiting for the bridge to give me the visual solution. Once they correlate, I then turn to the commanding officer, say, sir, ready for call for fire, I'm ready to execute the mission. Except we're waiting, and my commanding officer is going, Mike, when are we going to be ready to fire the mission? And I'm going, sir, I'm not hearing from the bridge. I turn to my communicator and say, what are you hearing from the bridge? And he says, sir, it sounds like utter chaos. I run up on the bridge. It happens to be one level above us. I run up on the bridge, and it's utter chaos because one member of my team on the bridge has now decided he can't take a human life.
Oh, wow.
And we're in the middle of this fire mission for troops in contact with wounded. And I literally say, okay, relieve this individual, get somebody else on the position. We were able to do that. We fired the mission, but it was my greatest failure because I thought to myself, your whole mission was to be ready for combat. And in your first combat scenario, you weren't ready. Why? And I made the mistake of assuming, I assumed that everybody on the team, hey, we're in the Navy. We enlisted. We knew we were going to fight. It's part of the job. I never sat down with the team and said, so do you understand that in executing this mission of firing the weapons, our guns, there's a very real possibility we're going to take human life. And are we all comfortable with that? Because if we're not, then we shouldn't be here. I never had that conversation.
Wow.
So for the next 35 years, every organization, every team I was a part of, I always said to myself, we'll be ready for combat. I will never fail at doing this. It shaped everything I did for the next 35 years. It happened when I was a JG, and yet when I was a 4-star admiral, I never forgot that. And as I was leading NSA, as I was leading Cyber Command, every day I would ask myself, are we ready for combat? Are we ready to execute the mission? I said, this is never going to happen to me again. No, we're not ready.
Wow, that is an incredible story. Definitely a lot of lessons out of that. One thing that's kind of sticking out of me is setting those expectations and making sure that you're prepared and ready to
Right?
go.
You got to talk to your team. You can't assume. I made the classic mistake as a leader. I assumed. I made an assumption.
Yes, that gets you in a lot of trouble.
Terrible.
Yes, sir. Thank you for that story. That was great. And you mentioned getting into cybercom and getting into NSA. Can you tell me a little bit, sir, how you got there, and then kind of that experience and lessons you got from that?
So I was very fortunate as I became more senior. I was given greater and greater opportunity to expand my skill set, to show the leadership in the department that I could execute missions of greater and greater importance with more and more resources. Very unusual for my career field, had been very narrow. Traditionally, in my career field, nobody in the history of the United States Navy in my career field had ever been a 3-star or above. Had never been a fleet commander, had never been a naval component commander, had never been the director of NSA, had never been a combatant commander. I was very fortunate. I tell people it wasn't so much about me. It was that I served in a time when my skill set was increasingly valued. And so I kept getting opportunities that most of my predecessors had never done. I was the assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I then became the director of intelligence at INDOPACOM. I then became the director of intelligence for the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Again, nobody in my specialty had ever done that. And then I became Fleet Cyber Commander, the commander of the 10th Fleet as a 3-star. And so I was given this opportunity as a 4-star to become the director of NSA and become the commander of Cyber Command. I was incredibly fortunate. It was only because I had worked for great people who gave me an opportunity, and I worked with great teammates. And so, when I became this 4-star, I'm running the largest intelligence organization in the US. And at the same time, you're one of the then 10 combatant commanders. So I have a foot in the intel world and a foot in the operational world. I loved it. It was real, but it's really unusual. It's the only jobs really in the US military where you do that. And it's in part because cyber is so entwined in many ways with intelligence. It's why they had one person do both. Um, but to get the job, I had to be interviewed by the then president, President Obama. I'd never been in the Oval Office before. I'd never gone to a job interview.
With the president. Whoa.
So that was a different set of experiences. But I just found you just talk to him. He asked me what my vision was. I said, hey, here's what I think we need to do in the jobs. But I also said, sir, but if I'm selected, part of my job is to support you as the president of the United States. What recommendations or what things do you think would be important in this job? So it was interesting. He talked to me. We talked for like 45 minutes for what was supposed to be a 25-minute discussion, but I really found it very interesting. And then I was fortunate to work for his successor, President Trump, who President Trump and Obama, forget about politics, two very different individuals. Forget about politics, just two very different individuals. But I'm proud to say that I served multiple presidents.
Wow, that's definitely incredible that you had those opportunities to sit in the.
It's very fortunate.
Office.
Very fortunate.
Could imagine how much fun that would be doing.
I don't know that I would describe it as fun some days.
Sure, stressful at
The
times.
president is not always happy when you're there in the Oval. As President Obama always used to say, if Mike calls, it usually means something terrible has happened. But the flip side is, if Mike calls, you better take the call. So,
Yes, sir. And I'm wondering too, on a personal note, going through your career, what's kept you personally motivated to keep pursuing that next level and that next level?
to me, look, it was never the rank that mattered. The thing that I loved the most was being part of strong teams. So, if people ask me what I miss, it's not the mission so much. It's the fact that I just love being part of good teams. Even now I look to be in my civilian life. I'm always wondering what can I do to be a part of a good team. I just love working with other men and women. I didn't like being the boss as much as I liked, hey, we're all working together to achieve an outcome. And it's an important, as I got more senior, the outcomes became more and more important. And the outcomes in some ways became riskier and riskier. But on the other hand, I thought I'm getting to do this with great men and women, and we're doing something that matters, and we're doing something that's directly supports the citizens of our nation as well as our friends and allies around the world. And I'm doing it with great men and women. You can ask for more. Every day is great, literally. You certainly have bad days, but I never had a single day in 37 years where I thought to myself, I made it the wrong choice. I should have never been in the Navy. Well, I did love every day, but I never really questioned, only once really.
Yes, sir. I remember we had a General Lutton. He graduated from Kent State, Air Force guy as well. But he always said he always said the day that I don't enjoy the Air Force is the day that I'll quit. He said I'm still here enjoying the Air Force. So I really think that's what it's all about, is having that.
I always tell people, look, as long as you are making a difference, as long as you are relevant, as long as you are doing something that you value, and something that your bosses continue to listen to you, I'll stay. But for example, if I thought my bosses were tuning me out and didn't care, then I'd say, hey, it's time for somebody else. Put somebody else in here who's going to be more effective with this particular leader.
Yes, sir. And I kind of want to transition into. So, would you have any would you have any um would you have any words of encouragement for people maybe younger going into ROTC? Maybe things that you would have told yourself when you were in that position.
So, first of all, remember there's multiple ways to achieve a goal. Focus on the goal. My goal was I want to be a naval officer and I want to be a ship driver. Annapolis didn't work, scholarship didn't work, but I ultimately was able to get into ROTC, what we call the college program, and then get a scholarship. So, again, that lesson about always focus on the goal. And there's multiple paths normally to achieve a goal. Secondly, I worked when I was, as I said, I was an assistant to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, first Marine ever to be the chairman, the 16th chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Peter Pace. And one of the things he always used to say was, bloom wherever you're planted, grow wherever you're planted. Whatever the job is, it may not have been your first choice. It might not have even been something you wanted to do. Focus on doing the best damn job you can, and everything will take care of itself. And I have always found that to be the case. Um, and then remember, it's about the mission first, but you can't do it without these men and women. So if you focus on the mission and you focus on these great men and women and not yourself, good things are going to happen. It's when you start to focus on yourself and you start to think that your needs are more important than those of others or the mission. I think that's when it's time to choose a different career. And there's nothing wrong with choosing a different career.
Yes, sir.
This life in uniform is demanding. It asks much of those who wear the uniform, but also those who love those men and women wearing the uniform. I always try to tell people, look, when I look back on 37 years, the hardest part was never anything I had to do. The hardest part was what my wife and my sons had to put up with. And if you haven't lived in this military environment, it's hard to truly understand what we put our families through. That is the part that I always feel the worst about. When I look back on my career, I don't think about myself and if I had bad days. I think about I got to do something I loved, but the people I love the most in my life, my wife and my sons, in my case, I had two sons, um, they had to pay a price for me doing that. And I don't ever forget that.
Awesome. Well, I think those are great, great things for sure, sir. Is there any other final remarks you'd like to make on this?
No, to
With
your
this?
teammates at Kent State, thanks very much for what you're willing to do to potentially serve the nation. You never know where the journey is going to take you. And for some of you, this is going to be a route to a commission. For some of you, you're going to say, hey, I'm glad I did this for a couple of years, but this isn't really me and I'm not going to keep doing it. I'm just grateful for your willingness to do it for some period of time. For those of you who do it for a short period of time and then go on to be a college student and do something else, be the best damn citizen you can be and try to keep this country strong and try to work together to make us stronger. And we're stronger not just because we got a great economy, because got a great military. We're strong because we have great values and we respect each other and we abide by the law. And we're trying to make the world better. That's one of the things that makes America what it is. If you are going to go on and you go into the military, you go into the Air Force, be the best damn pilot, whatever that specialty might be. And there's lots of specialties besides being a pilot. Do the best damn job you can. Because you want to look back when it's over, whether that over is 4 years, 8 years, or in my case, 37 years. I just want to look back and be able to say, every day I tried to give it the best I had. And I can honestly say every day I tried to give it the best I had. And I got to work with great men and women to do something that I thought mattered. And we tried to make a difference.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you. I want to thank Cadet Royal for setting us up. First off, and then
Well done, young man.
yes, sir. Yeah, it's great. I mean, he got this whole thing set up. I'm just here sitting in the seat, right?
Oh.
And sir, Admiral Rogers, I just want to thank you again for.
No, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
It was a real pleasure.
It is a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, guys.